Hey guys, it's me, Seren, back with another video. We are on day 15 of Hidden Figures, and today's hidden figure is Willa Brown. Willa Brown was an aviator, a lobbyist, a teacher, and a civil rights activist. She was an American aviator, lobbyist, teacher, and civil rights activist, and she was also the first African American woman to earn her pilot's license in the United States. So I know a lot of you guys have suggested Bessie Coleman, who was the first African-American woman to earn her pilot's license, period. However, Bessie Coleman had to go to France to get her pilot's license because of the racism here in this country. Willa Beatrice Brown was actually the first African-American woman to receive a pilot's license here in the United States. And that was actually one of many firsts. She was the first African-American woman to earn her pilot's license in the U.S. She was the first African-American woman to run for the United States Congress. She was the first African-American officer in the U.S. Civil Air Patrol of any gender. And she was the first woman in the United States to have both a pilot's license and a mechanic's license, right? So she was getting down. A lifelong advocate for gender and racial equality in flight and in the military, Brown not only lobbied the U.S. government to integrate the U.S. Army Air Corps and include African Americans in the Civilian Pilot Training Program, the CPTP, but also co-founded the Coffey School of Aeronautics with Cornelius Coffey, which was the first private flight training academy in the United States, owned and operated by African Americans. She trained hundreds of pilots, several of whom would go on to become Tuskegee Airmen. And we know about the Tuskegee Airmen, right? But we don't know about Willa Brown, who trained several of them, right? Black woman, hidden figure. Well after the Coffey School closed in 1945, Brown remained politically and socially active in Chicago. She organized flight schools for children. She ran for Congress 3 more times in 1946, 1948, and 1950 respectively, and she was an active member of the West Side Community Church, and she taught in the Chicago public school system until 1971, when she retired at the age of 65. So she was born January 22nd, 1906, and she died July 18th, 1992 at the age of 86. Willa Brown Chappelle was born in Glasgow, Kentucky in 1927. She graduated from Indiana State Teachers College with a degree in business, and she received an MBA from Northwestern University in 1937. As a young high school teacher in Gary, Indiana, and later as a social worker in Chicago, Willa Brown felt that her talents were not being used to their greatest use. She sought greater challenges and adventures in life, especially if they could be found outside the limited career fields normally open to African Americans. She decided to learn to fly, studying with Cornelius Coffey, a certified flight instructor and expert aviation mechanic at one of Chicago's airports. In 1938, she became the first African American woman who earned a private pilot's license in the United States. Fellow Chicagoan and aviator Bessie Coleman had to go to France for her license in 1921. Later, Brown and Coffey married and established the Coffey School of Aeronautics at Harlem Airport in Chicago, where they trained black pilots and black aviation mechanics. Together with Cornelius Coffey and Enoch P. Waters, Willa Brown also helped form the National Airmen's Association of America in 1939, whose main goal was to get black aviation cadets into the United States military. As the organization's national secretary and the president of the Chicago branch, Brown became an activist. Brown later became the coordinator for the Federal Civilian Pilot Training Program in Chicago. Later, her flight school was also selected by the U.S. Army to provide black trainees for the Air Corps Pilot Training Program at the Tuskegee Institute. So there basically would be no Tuskegee Airmen without this woman, Willa Brown. Willa Brown eventually became the coordinator of war training service for the Civil Aeronautics Authority and later was a member of the Federal Aviation Administrators Women's Advisory Board. She was the first black female officer in the Civil Air Patrol and the first black woman to hold a commercial pilot's license in the United States. Wow. Willa Beatrice Brown was one of a small group of pre-World War II black women aviators. She also studied at the Curtis Wright Aeronautical University and in 1935 earned a master's mechanics certificate. In 1937, Brown became the first African-American woman in the U.S. to earn a commercial pilot's license. 2 years later, she married her former flight instructor, Cornelius Coffey, and they co-founded the Cornelius Coffey School of Aeronautics, the first Black-owned and operated private flight training academy in the U.S. In 1939, the Coffey School was awarded a contract by the federal government to train Americans to fly airplanes in case of a national emergency. Later that year, Brown became a co-founder of the National Airmen's Association of America. She also joined the Challenger Air Pilots Association, the Chicago Girls Flight Club, and purchased her own airplane, all between 1939 and 1940. By 1941, hundreds of men and women had trained under Brown, including many men who later became members of the famed Tuskegee Airmen. Brown was the director-coordinator of 2 Civil Aeronautics Administration programs, one at the Harlem Airport and the other at Wendell Phillips High School in Chicago. Brown achieved another distinction in 1941 when she became the first African-American officer in the U.S. Civil Air Patrol. She was commissioned a lieutenant. And in 1943, Brown earned her mechanic's license, becoming the first woman in the United States to have both a mechanic's license and a commercial pilot's license. In 1972, in recognition of her contributions to aviation in the United States as a pilot, an instructor, and an activist, she was appointed to the Federal Aviation Administration's Women's Advisory Board. That is incredible. Wow. It's really wild to think, like, how we hear about, like, the Tuskegee Airmen and, like, Red Tails and all that, but they won't tell you, like, oh, but, like, this Black woman trained all these people. There would be no Tuskegee Airmen unit without Willa Brown. And I can't find any quotes. There's actually, like, not very much, like, super much even, like, written about her. Which is, like, what? I can't find any quotes from her, which is just annoying when I, like, can't find quotes, because it's like, I know these Black women spoke. Like, you know, I know they spoke, but it's like, I have to read these, like, other people's words about them because, you know, I can't find any quotes, and I'm sure that has to do with, you know, misogynoir and other people telling the stories of these women instead of, like, them telling the stories for themselves. But I'm going to keep my eye out and see if I can find some quotes for you guys. If I do end up being able to find some quotes, I will put them in the description box, or I will leave them in the comments, whichever you guys prefer. But Willa Brown, pioneer woman pilot and president of the National Airmen's Association of America, the first Black woman to earn a pilot's license in the United States, the first Black woman to own and operate a Black-owned pilot academy, activist, politician, aviator, Willa Beatrice Brown, a hidden motherfucking figure. See you guys tomorrow. Peace.